comes from the bone marrow. Same thing in the skin after a burn. Same thing in the kidney. Same thing in the lung. Same thing in the pancreas. I'll come back to that one. Sorry, did I mess up here? There you go. In the pancreas. So I'll come back to that later. I'm just showing a few. Just to show here that with this phenomenon, with this tool, suddenly we reveal a phenomenon that has always been there. We simply never saw it. And the reason why we don't see it is that a stem cell that migrates, let's say in your liver, within a day is a liver cell. You look at that cell, you cannot tell that yesterday it was a stem cell. The phenomenon is completely invisible until you can start to mark the cell, and then bingo, the whole phenomenon is revealed. So where did it start for me in this is that when these first studies were published, documenting how stem cells can become, at the very beginning, brain cells, liver cells, heart cells. These were published as like anomalies. This was observed and it looked like completely outside of known science. But to me, you see a stem cell that can become a brain cell, a heart cell, a liver cell, and you think that it's an anomaly. It's like looking at a caterpillar becoming a butterfly and you say, what a weird caterpillar. No, I'm sorry, that's what caterpillars do. So when you see a stem cell becoming a brain cell and a heart cell and a liver cell, why not pancreatic cells? Why not lung cells? Why not skin cells? And if they do, it has a reason. It just not happened like this by chance. So it has to be the repair system of the body. So we published an article in which we suggested stem cells constitute the natural repair system of the body. So that was the starting point. Fast forward 15 years, 18 years later, here's what we know today. Well documented, thousands of studies. This is no longer just an idea. This is what is happening in your body. So far so good? Not too technical? It will go a little bit deeper. Okay, anytime there's a problem, something is not working right in your body, the affected area will release compounds that will migrate, reach the bone marrow, and will trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. These compounds today are very, very well known. They are used in the medical field all the time, very well known. When stem cells are released from the bone marrow, within about 3 to 5 days, the number of stem cells will increase 3 to 10 times. So stem cells are increased, they circulate everywhere in the body. So how do they know where to go? And that's why sometimes after a heart attack, people hear voices. Stem cells say, where do I go? No, it's not true. They circulate everywhere, they don't know where to go. So what happens is that starting on the second day, there's another compound that is released by the affected tissue very locally. So the stem cell is circulating everywhere. Stem cells are circulating everywhere, but when they, like in the whole body, but when they circulate into the fine capillaries of the affected tissue, locally, there's a molecule that is released, and it's the signal for the stem cell to leave the blood circulation, migrate into the tissue, so cross the capillary wall, migrate into the tissue. I'm skipping all the process, but it's a beautiful process. And then when it lands into the tissue, it still senses where the signal is coming from, where the injury is. The stem cell will crawl in the tissue, reach the site of the injury, and upon contact with cellular debris of that tissue, the stem cell will multiply and become cells of that tissue. Isn't that beautiful? This is your so you have an immune system, and now what we're discovering is that you also have a repair system. Since the day you're born, as important, you have a repair system. Of that system, the parts, the steps that are pretty obvious. First, you release stem cells, then they circulate, then they migrate in the tissue, and when they arrive in the tissue, they multiply, and then they become cells of that tissue. But in this whole process, the part that has been the most studied is the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, for the simple reason that those molecules known to trigger stem cell release, we know them, so we can use them, so we have tools to trigger stem cell release. So in science, you can only study the things for which you have a tool to play with them. So most of the studies in the field of stem cells have been about the link between the number of stem cells in circulation and health. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Actually, the conclusion of all these studies, and then I'll show studies to illustrate these, is that more stem cells in circulation means that more stem cells are available to participate to the process of tissue repair. So that means you get two people with the same problem, the same broken bone. The one that has more stem cells just repairs better. And you understand now why. It's very simple. Stem cells will migrate and they will help the repair of that tissue. If you get any one individual with a problem, if you can put more stem cells in circulation, that person will do better. It's that simple. Now, I will take a few studies to illustrate all of this. I want it to be very clear. I am not implying, suggesting in any way, shape, or form that Blu will do this. I'm using these studies because that's what is in the scientific literature. That's how we know all these things. So I'm showing to you what you can find in the scientific literature. Here's a study that was published almost 15 years ago, in which scientists took 500 individuals at risk for cardiovascular problem. They counted the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of these people. They didn't do anything, they just counted what's normal. We all have a different number of stem cells, just like we all have a different height, and we all have a different number of white blood cells, red blood cells. We all have a different number of stem cells, anywhere between 0.01 cell per microliter to 5 cell per microliter. So it's a pretty broad range. So we're all into that range. We want to be on the higher side. That's the whole point. So as they quantified stem cells, they monitored these individuals for any kind of cardiovascular event, angina, arrhythmia, heart attack, whatever. And then a year later, they correlated the occurrence of cardiovascular events with the number of stem cells. So when they separated these people in 3 groups, people with a lot of stem cells, people with average number of stem cells, people with few stem cells, every time you see a line going down in that graph, this is a person having heart problems of some kind. And it's pretty obvious to see that people with fewer stem cells experience way more health problems. The conclusion was that the number of stem cells in circulation was the best predictor of cardiovascular health. Meaning, you can quantify cholesterol, you can take blood pressure, you can do everything that is normally done to predict your risk for cardiovascular event, and by far, how many stem cells in your bloodstream is a much better predictor. So that is just to show how people with more stem cells tend to repair better, maintain their health better. Now here's a study done at the National Institute of Health in which they wanted to see, okay, if more stem cells means better, what if I can enhance this whole phenomenon and put more stem cells in the blood circulation? Can I really have an effect on the course of various kinds of health problems? So this is scientists who stopped the blood flow to the heart, so it triggered a heart attack. They let the animal recover, separated the animals in 2 groups. One group was control. In the other group, they injected those compounds known to trigger stem cell release. So the only difference is the control group had nothing, the experimental group had more stem cells in circulation. When they looked at the animal 27 days later, in the control group, we see the typical scar tissue, no new blood vessels, 17% survival and fairly severe signs of cardiomyopathy. The typical outcome of a severe heart attack. In the experimental group, complete renewal of the ventricular wall, new blood vessels tapping in the ventricles, 73% survival, and quasi-normalized cardiovascular function. In a world where there's nothing we can do to help the heart recover, here's a study that shows almost complete recovery in a month. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. They cannot do it exactly like that study in humans for reasons that will be too complex to go into here. But that study is extremely relevant because it shows one clear phenomenon. The body has the biology, the physiology, it has the machinery, it has what it takes to use any extra stem cells that you give it to put into tissue repair. That's what that study is really showing. Now let's look at all of this using now diabetes. Again, I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you here. I want you to see that it's just not one study, one condition. I want to paint the picture here that you look at just about any aspects of human health and stem cells can play a fundamental role. To show that stem cells can play a role in something like diabetes, I need to show 2 things. I need to show that stem cells can naturally, on their own, leave the bone marrow, as you're sitting here, can leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and becoming insulin-producing cells. If I can show that this is a natural phenomenon, then the second thing is to show if I enhance this phenomenon, can it start to repair to a point where it means something? Fair enough? Okay, first study, brilliant study. Scientists took male mice in which they did a genetic manipulation. They attached to the gene for insulin, they attached the gene for green fluorescent protein. So if a cell starts to make insulin, it also makes green fluorescent protein, so it turns green, so you can see it. They irradiated female mice, which kills all the stem cells, and they injected stem cells from the male mice into the female mice. So I have female mice whose bone marrow now is made of stem cells that have the Y chromosome, so you can follow them. And if any one of these cells starts to make insulin, it will turn green. Fair enough? This is as complicated as it will get. The rest is I was going to say downhill. The rest is easy. So they isolated cells from the pancreas 3 weeks later. Look at that one cell. You put a black light, it glows. It has transcribed the gene for insulin. But is it making actual insulin? Using a red dye for insulin, it is making insulin. It's actually making insulin like just between the other two cells. It's not overactive, it's not a Frankenstein cell, it's not a sluggish cell, it's not a weird cell. It's just a normal cell of your pancreas. By the way, at the end of this lecture, what I want you to understand is that as you're sitting here, you have not one single cell in your pancreas that you're born with. They all came through that process. This is just a very natural process. And it came from the bone marrow. It does have the Y chromosome. Stem cells can, on their own, naturally leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and just be normal, natural, insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. Good? Next step. In medical science, when we study diseases, we need to trigger the problem in the animals. You will never find a mouse with Parkinson. You will never find a mouse with Alzheimer's that has forgotten what a cat is. It won't happen. You need to trigger the problem. So in Alzheimer's, for example, you do a hole in the skull and you put aluminum. And it will trigger all the lesions that are seen in Alzheimer's. And you've got these models for just about every single type of human disease. In diabetes, so this is a normal island of Langerhans. This is the part in the pancreas that makes insulin. Scientists have found a toxin coming from a bacteria. If you inject it in the body, within 24, 48 hours, these island of Langerhans lose all their ability to make insulin. So now these animals are diabetic, so now you can study them, study what it does, or how you can repair them. So they used a third group in which they injected this compound called streptozotocin, plus compounds that trigger stem cell release. ESCM is endogenous stem cell mobilization. And these mice recovered enough to the point where they're no longer diabetic. It's partial recovery, but they're no longer diabetic. The same study was done in humans in Italy with 14 people recently diagnosed for insulin-dependent diabetes. They did 2 rounds of stem cell release, and of those 14, 13 were insulin-independent for a while, and many of them still fine 3 years after when they stopped the study. I am not telling you we have found a treatment for diabetes. I'm telling you your stem cells have an enormous ability. They can migrate in virtually every tissue, and they can operate some level of repair in every tissue. It's what they do. I can show you same studies here with different kinds of health conditions. I won't go to all the details. Get the message. Stem cells, from the day you're born, that's what they do. Okay, so the real conclusion from all of this is that more stem cells in circulation, better stem cell function. Sorry. And the corollary of all of this, meaning more stem cells in circulation means that you can repair better, the corollary is also true. And to me, this is the take-home message, the most important message. Because when we're all healthy and everything is fine and we don't have a problem, we think that everything is fine. And we forget that we've gotten used to live our lives with a lot of things that are suboptimal. But because it's not called a disease, we live with it. We don't sleep as well as we used to. We don't run as fast as we used to. We don't climb stairs as fast as we used to. We don't concentrate as well as we used to. Vision is not what it was. Hair color definitely is not what it was. And it's fine because it's not a disease. And so we need to realize stem cells also play a role day to day in maintaining the body, giving it the ability to reach optimal health. So fewer stem cells in circulation has been linked to the development of health problems. So here's a little bit what I mean with this. Today, so far so good? From now on, it's simple. So today, the general understanding, the model that we use, the way we understand disease formation and aging is that we're born, we mature at anywhere between 20 and 25 years of age, we reach peak health, and from that point on, it's kind of a slow decline. That's sort of how we understand health. But all the science on stem cells is telling us something different. Health is actually a balance between two phenomena in the body. On one hand, you lose cells every day. On the other end, you replace the cells that have been lost. When you're young, you have a lot of stem cells in your body, you release a lot, so you can compensate for the loss very well. Kids just repair so well and so fast. But as we age, the red marrow in our bones slowly changes to yellow marrow, fatty marrow. And the stem cells are only made by the red marrow. So we have fewer and fewer stem cells. There's a point where we cross that line where we can no longer fully compensate for cellular loss. That's when we start to lose ground. Let me make a very simple analogy. It's like comparing this to your bank account. The two views is that you're born with a certain amount of money and spend it wisely, or you've got a regular income, regular expenses. As long as you meet your expenses, you're fine. It's much more logical. That's what happens in the body. You lose cells every day, you replace them. If you compensate, you're fine. Now, what will make one person develop diabetes, somebody else has Parkinson's, somebody else needs a titanium needs, we all have different problems. It's a whole slew of factors that you know very well. Your genetics, your past injuries, your exposure to environmental toxins, your lifestyle, physical stress, your exposure to physical stress, your emotional stress, your diet, your ability to rest, your mother-in-law, all of these, they apply pressure on you, and then your ability to compensate for these will basically determine what problem you will experience. So if I continue with my banking analogy, it's like saying somebody cannot make his car payment, somebody else cannot pay for his mortgage, somebody else cannot pay for his medical bill, and somebody else cannot pay for their tuition fees. So we've got car problem, house problem, education problem, and health problems. But we don't. We only have cash problems. It shows up differently, but it's just money problems. Same thing here. It shows up differently, but the bottom line is the ability to repair day to day is decreased, so the problem will show up wherever is the leak point in your biology taken in the broadest sense. So the understanding behind this is that we are constantly going through a process of tissue turnover. We simply need to replace as fast as we lose cells. Now, all these conclusions are coming from incidental observation. What I talked before. You inject fluorescent stem cells in mice. You trigger an injury, and then you see the area becoming green, you see the repair. But when scientists look, like for example, you trigger a heart attack and you look at tissue repair. When scientists go then in the lung, in the liver, in the pancreas, in the skin, in the digestive tract, in all the tissues of these animals, the fascinating observation is that you've got way more green cells in the injured tissue, but you've got them everywhere. In the background, at a lower level, they migrate in various tissues. Only one study that I know of has looked at this in detail, so let's talk about it because it's a fascinating study. I will go a little bit complicated again, and then it won't be complicated after. But it's fascinating. It's using a reality of life, the fact that historically there's no radioactive carbon in the atmosphere. Radioactive carbon started to rise sharply after atomic bomb testing. It reached its peak in 1965 when there was the international ban on above ground atomic bomb testing. So then radioactive carbon started to dissipate into the stratosphere, so it showed a slow decline. Whatever ratio of radioactive carbon that you have in the atmosphere, it is taken and used through photosynthesis to be incorporated into plants. plants are eaten by animal and by us, and we eat the animal as well. Which means that the carbon in my diet, the ratio of radioactive carbon in my diet, is a reflection of the ratio of radioactive carbon in the atmosphere, right? On a day where I make a new cell, like I have a cell that divides, I need to duplicate the DNA. The DNA is made of carbon. Where is that carbon coming from? From my diet. So the carbon that is incorporated in a strand of DNA will have a ratio of radioactive carbon that reflects my diet and the environment. Fair enough? So if I take a cell and I quantify the ratio of radioactive carbon, oops, sorry. I guess I clicked too quick, there you go. I can date when that cell was born. So now, if I take the heart of people who recently were deceased, that are born after 1965, and I isolate cells, I'm testing now two hypotheses. One hypothesis is that I'm born, and before, let's say, age 1 to 5, I form all my heart, so all the cells will have been born around the time of birth. Or, there's a constant renewal, so I'm going to show a spread of new cells coming throughout the life of the individuals. Conclusion, you have about half of a new heart every 25 years. A new pancreas every 4 or 5 years. A new liver every 2-3 years. Everything is in a constant process of turnover. And that is crucial to understand, because it comes back to our balance. If it's like your bank account, you spend money every day of your life, as long as your income meets your expenses, you're fine. So that means, if this is all true, that means one way to show this is that I go and I count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have developed all kinds of different health problems, and statistically, they should all have fewer stem cells than healthy people. And it showed up in different ways in them. Is that clear? Okay. This is the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people with diabetes. So normal glucose tolerance, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, and then diabetes. Conclusion, there's a straight line between how many stem cells I have and the evolution of the problem. And when I'm diagnosed, I have about half the number of stem cells that I found in healthy people. If I take these people, those who have developed kidney problem as a consequence of the diabetes, and I quantify kidney function. So when the line goes up, it means deterioration of kidney function. People with fewer stem cells, people with a lot of stem cells. People with more stem cells maintain themselves over time. The exact same thing with muscular dystrophy. They have now established that if you count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of somebody newly diagnosed, you can predict the evolution of the problem. They have more stem cells, they evolve very slowly. If I count the number of stem cells, so these are people to the right who complain of erectile dysfunction, to the left, control patients. All the dots is the number of stem cells in their circulation. If I bring the average to the axis, you can see that people who complain of erectile dysfunction have on average about half the number of stem cells found in normal control individual. Now I take all these people and I establish the International Index of Erectile Function. I have a straight line. Direct relationship between how many stem cells I have and overall cardiovascular function. Last one, the lung. These are different types of stem cells in the blood that scientists have quantified in people with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and normal people, baseline and after exercise. Okay? First conclusion, exercise releases stem cells. Second conclusion, people with COPD have, on average, half the number of stem cells when compared to healthy people. I can continue like this. It's more, every time they study one, they see the same kind of relationship. So the overall conclusion, higher number of stem cells, better stem cell function, means that your body is more capable to maintain itself, regain and maintain optimal health. Fair enough? Now that we know all of this, what can we do to put more stem cells in circulation? Remember what we said in the introduction. If you run a marathon every week, you fast 3 days a week, you don't smoke, you sleep well, you live on an island isolated with no toxins, then you're fine. But if you don't, if that's not your life, there are ways to put more stem cells in circulation. And this is where all my story with stem cells started. I was studying this plant, a blue-green algae that grows from Klamath Lake in southern Oregon, trying to understand how it worked, because people were reporting benefits on the heart, on the pancreas, on the lung, on the skin, so many different aspects of human health that we were trying to understand how it worked. When suddenly somebody sent me an article, the title was Turning Blood into Brain. The first observation of a stem cells becoming a brain cells. So we developed all of our thought process that I shared with you, and we went in the lab and we tested that plant. What if it released stem cells from the bone marrow? And we discovered that's what it did. 1 hour after consumption, it put more stem cells in circulation. After we found that, then to me it was impossible that there would be only one plant having an effect on stem cells. We have evolved in symbiosis with the environment, so there has to be more plants. So we started to look at more, and the one that I discovered over the past few years, which is fascinating, is sea buckthorn berry from the Tibetan plateau. Normally in science, the name of a plant refers to its morphology, its visible characteristics, or physical characteristics. But there are a few plants who have been named according to their benefits. Hippophae means hippo is horse, phae is light. It's Alexander the Great traveling in western China during the time of his conquest. And at some point, he abandoned a herd of injured horse. He left them to die in a field of sea buckthorn. He came back a few weeks later. There was a herd of healthy, vibrant horses with shiny coat, which means health for a horse. So the berry was called shining horse. Same observation was made by Genghis Khan. From there, it was integrated in Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine, where it's used for lung health, cardiovascular health, for the pancreas, blood glucose, for repairing from wounds, from burns. So to me, when I see the benefits like this for various tissues, it means probably the action is stem cells. So we developed an extract, we tested it, and we could see a significant increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. So I'm showing you the two key components of Revive Blue, but it's a formula here with 4 ingredients that have all been documented to support various aspects of the natural role of your stem cells in your body. So really what the benefits of Revive Blue is to support the body's natural renewal system, and I hope now you understand the importance of this every day. They have some components like the blue-green algae and the beta-glucans that have been shown to support immune function. You have the sea buckthorn and the aloe that also has strong antioxidant capabilities. So you've got the main function, and there's a series of secondary functions because of all of these support healthy aging. And the last one, I didn't have a chance to go into it, but there's a very, very nice synergy between AFA and the sea buckthorn that will make a lot of people feel within about, 30 to 60 minutes after taking the product, just like, I just feel good. You know, there's the feel-good effect with the product. There is a real chemistry behind this in the product. Okay, let's go through a few questions, because oftentimes people come and they have a lot of questions. We can only answer a few of them. So I wanted to go through some of these questions, but probably the most effective way of going to your questions is to ask myself questions. How about that? And the reason why I'm saying this is that they're always the same questions. So by going it that way, we can cover more ground, and most likely I will have answered your key question. The first top question is, if my mother, my father, my husband, my wife, my brother, my kid, my dog, my cat, my fish, my snake, my parrot, my whatever, has whatever problem, can Revive Blue help? I mean, this is the first question that anybody has. The answer will always be the same. This product has not been studied on any disease, so I can't tell you. I'm not a medical doctor, I cannot give you medical advice. The one thing that I can tell you is that stem cells can become liver cells, pancreatic cells, lung cells, brain cells, skin cells, retinal cells. It can become anything. The product will do only one little thing, very benign. It just gives a little kick to this natural process in your body that is to release stem cells. And when you do that every day, and you enhance that every day, it can have huge impact on your health because your body will use these stem cells. The product doesn't do anything, does one little thing. With more stem cells in circulation, your body will use them as it has done since the day you were born to repair all kinds of tissues. Early on, I remember, with all this research, we think that we're smart and we know a lot of things, and so people will ask the question, can it help with this kind of problem? And I would oftentimes say, I don't think it can help you. You know, knowing everything that I know, I don't think it can help you. And they would come back a month or 2 or 3 later, and they would tell me these amazing stories, and I just realized that what I knew defined more my overall ignorance of what the body does than what I really knew. And I realized that oftentimes I would take away from people possibly something that could really help them because the knowledge did not allow me to go far enough in making an assertion. So I've realized over the years that my most ethical and honest statement is to say, just give it a try. Just see what it can do for you. It's not about what your brain knows, it's not about how I can convince you, it's really about what your body can do with these stem cells. Take the product, release them, and you tell me later what it did for you. Honestly, does it matter more to see the benefits or to understand them? Just try it. Second big question, if I take Blu every day, can I deplete the bone marrow? You know, if I release these stem cells every day, will one day be walking on the sidewalk and just fall? I ran out of my last stem cells. It does not happen. Nobody runs out of stem cells. Even when they die at 110, it's not because they ran out of stem cells. So you won't run out of stem cells. There are many ways to answer that question. Who in our society releases a lot of stem cells? Top athletes. Do they appear to like age faster and crumble faster? No. One study was done a number of years ago. The question was, if I only have one stem cell left, can I reconstitute the bone marrow? So they irradiated mice and they injected one stem cell in the bloodstream. 6 weeks later, the entire blood was reconstituted, the entire bone marrow was reconstituted. It is a powerful system in your body. To understand how it works, everywhere in nature, cell divides using a process called symmetrical cellular division. One strand of the new DNA, of the original DNA, go in each daughter cells, one copy go in each daughter cells. There are 2 identical daughter cells. In the bone marrow, it's called a symmetrical cellular division. It's also called the immortal DNA strand theory. And it's the fact that the original strands go into one cell, that one stays in the bone marrow, the one with the copies goes into the blood. And the concept here is that anytime you release a stem cell, one remains into the bone marrow. So when you release 5 million stem cells, you're not lacking 5 million stem cells. There's a powerful ability to just maintain the bone marrow. It stays what it is. The amount of stem cells you release by taking Blu is less than what you would release if you have an injury. The magic here is that you can do this every day, and we see that it makes a lot of difference in people's life. Can I get side effects? Or if I stop using the product, what happens? If you stop, a few people has turned into pumpkins, but it's rare. No, it's not true. Can I get side effects? There is one very well-known side effect of Blu is joy. You feel happy. So if you're attached to being grumpy, don't take the product. Otherwise, give it a try. There's no problem. I've been working with this for 18 years. We need to understand, we have not discovered anything new. We have discovered that things that we have been using for centuries, we have discovered how they work. That's really what is new about it. So all these products have been used for a long time in human history. They're safe. What happens if I stop taking the product? Let me rephrase that question. You know, it's the guy who goes to McDonald's all his life, and he's about 30 years old, and the doctor tells him, your health is crumbling, you know, you've really got to do something different. So he becomes vegetarian, and a year later, perfect health. Conclusion, I can go back to McDonald's. Ridiculous. If you found a way to be healthy, keep doing it. So why would you stop once you realize that you've given your body that edge to stay healthy? But if you stop, nothing will happen. There's no habituation, there's no addiction, there's none of this happening in the body. You stop, that's it, you just stop having the benefit. But it does bring a very important point. I mentioned it briefly before. We look in our society at health, essentially, if you think about it, as the absence of disease. We start to do something when we have the problem, and we forget something that is in our face every day of our lives. 10 years ago, I was climbing stairs 3 by 3. 5 years ago, 2 by 2. 2 years ago, 1 by 1. A year ago, 1 by 1 slowly. 6 months ago, 1 by 1 slowly. I stop in the middle to catch breath, and then I get a heart attack. From now on, I've got heart problems. But it didn't start on the day where it revealed itself to you. Everything is a slow process. The moment you lose that balance, you are slowly in decline. The way to stop that decline